Hello and welcome to the 14th episode of the Odds and Ends podcast. And this week we've got Andrew Sabisky. We're going to talk about some geopolitics. We're going to do some British politics. I imagine we're going to go off the rails at least once during this podcast. I think I'm going to give myself 70% prediction on that one. How are you doing today, Sab?
Yeah, I'm good, buddy.
Sabs is an analyst at the Bismarck analysis. You may have seen the Bismarck brief, that paper they put out on Substack. And Sab's one of their analysts.
Yeah. Now we've done some Nathan and I have done some forecasting together in various places. Been around the forecasting world a while. Stuff's on Good Judgment Open back in the day in like 2016, late 2015, and then through 2016.
Wow. I didn't realize it was so long ago.
Yeah, no. It's been a long time. Yeah. And then got my super forecaster certification there, and then did some private forecasting for Good Judgments on their private platform, kind of around 2017, 2018-ish. So yeah, no, I've been around a while.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Let's just get straight into it, I guess. So you can say otherwise, but maybe let's start with like Iran. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on Iran right now? In particular, I guess kind of forecast.
I'd prefer to live in a different country.
Sure.
I wouldn't like to live in Iran. Those are my main thoughts. I'm sure. Okay, but that wasn't what you were asking. I think everyone and their mother knows. I think there's almost certainly going to be some kind of like aggressive kinetic action from the Trump administration. How far that? Everyone knows that. The more interesting question is kind of like how maximalist are their goals. If they just want to get sort of like Khamenei out of power to get someone who seems more compliant, at least from the current setup, kind of in charge and get more of kind of like a nominal win. That they can do. That doesn't seem like it would be that hard to do, right? Which is kind of very similar to what they did in Venezuela, right? Or do you want to try and genuinely, push the current regime kind of out of power?
Ooh.
That, I think, it seems to be hard to do without boots on the ground, but maybe they're going to try just by kind of pure shock and awe and kind of try to hit IRGC
my
assets.
Internet dropped out for like a 15-second chunk of that, so you may just have to repeat that for me. I think the podcast will have got it, sadly, but I didn't. So sorry, could you say that last chunk again?
Oh, I was just saying that maybe they're going to try to hit IRGC assets as hard as they can, and then maybe there's some kind of plan that the main, like, the Iranian army kind of like takes over, right? As distinct from the IRGC. I find it hard to imagine that working, but Iran is kind of a tough place to forecast at. I don't think there's any prospect of Iran kind of like there being kind of some kind of like wholesale comprehensive regime change. The Pahlavi's coming back or liberal democracy in Iran. These things to me really don't seem to be on the agenda. And my guess is the Trump people probably know that.
Okay, so that gives us... Okay, so let's like rattle through... So what do you think the chances that we have a sort of liberal democracy in Iran maybe at the end of like next year to give it some bedding in time?
Well under 1%.
Okay. And...
That was easy.
Yeah. And, okay, interesting. And so you don't even think that's going to happen by accident? Surely, the US strikes. There's these big. You just think the IRGC takes control? Is that kind of your
I just don't see it. Well, the IRGC kind of is in control now. The real question is, does Iran kind of wind up with some kind of sort of like nationalist? I think the only real alternative to the current regime is a kind of like nationalist, secular, authoritarian regime. Emphasis on the secular, right? So maybe Iran tones it down. We all make friends with our neighbors. We start being we make nice to Israel, and So you get something much more. You get something more like that, right?
But you still think that falls short of anything we'd like sort of remotely call liberal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Uh,
I mean, look,
okay.
I don't. I mean, I wasn't aware that anyone disagreed. I don't know anyone who. I don't know anyone who thinks that liberal democracy is on the menu for Iran. I don't think the Pahlavi monarchical restoration thing is going to happen either. Not least because that guy is kind of a loser. And the Trump people know this. Like, the Trump people are well aware of this, I think.
Okay.
America in general is kind of anti-monarchy, doesn't like monarchies, doesn't like to install them. They had the chance to reinstate the monarchy in Afghanistan in 2001, didn't do it, even when it would have been probably a much, much, much better idea than what they wound up doing. And I think trying to get the Pahlavis back into Iran would be a bad idea. And also, they just have a big bias against doing that. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Okay.
Maybe that's under 5%.
Okay. Okay, so what's your percent of the US attacks before the end of March?
Before the end of March, we're 20th of February now. 73%. Yeah.
Okay.
But like, if it doesn't happen by the end of March, I think it's also still really likely to happen in April.
Okay, so then how much for the whole year?
82.
Okay, that's like slightly higher than me, but I think it's like pretty similar. I'm probably like maybe like 68, 75 or something.
You just don't. It's the same thing as in the month before Russia invaded Ukraine. You just don't build up quite this level of force in theatre unless you're pretty serious.
Yeah, I think this is so. I've been doing the Metaculus spring tournament. And this is one of the questions, and maybe you knew this, but I've just been surprised the extent. When Trump builds up force, he goes in. Like he really doesn't actually very often like build up a load of troops in one place without doing something about it. I think it was about sort of 70%.
Also, Trump has kind of like a bias to action. He likes the kinetic option when it seems as though he can accomplish enough with it for a relatively low cost.
And he likes to go in and go out, is my sense.
Yeah.
Like he's enjoyed that kind of like Soleimani, Venezuela. If he can get in, if he can get out, if he can get some kind of press announcement out of it, then like that seems like a thing he does.
Yeah, and the big unknown really is, and this is the thing that I have no visibility on, is do they think, between the Americans and the Israelis, do they have some kind of read that there's some faction within Iran that they can deal with if they get rid of enough of the people who are currently in charge? Right? Yeah. And I could see that, right? But it's obviously this is one of the very, very, very rare times, I think. It's very hard to tell without access to classified information, which we don't have. But I could definitely see factions in, say, the Iranian army, which has kind of always been the runt of the litter in the post-79 regime, that might want to do a deal that might want to make a great, big, beautiful deal with Mr. Trump. That's kind of the obvious candidate. Maybe there's people within the RGC itself who are, somewhat, hacked off enough and kind of fed up of regime failure, and they say, look, we'll still be in charge, but we'll take the country in a better direction, which honestly wouldn't be that hard to do. So, the bar is set quite low. It's sort of like Venezuela in that regard. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, is there sort of like a re-roll theory of government here, rather than going in and sort of like quote unquote improving things? You just like smash it once, you see what happens. It's much cheaper than getting into a kind of like a protracted conflict. Or is that like a Nathan theory, which you don't think holds much?
Oh, I think that's definitely not a. Of course, I think that's very reasonable. I don't think that's a bad way to think about it at all. That's the kind of thing that would appeal to Trump. And of course, as I was saying, the thing about Iran and Venezuela is existing governance is so bad with the incredible levels of economic mismanagement. The bar is just set so low that it's really not that hard to do much better, right? So all
Okay, so in the next sort of until the end of Trump's term, do you see there as any other places that are over sort of like 20% of getting a strike? maybe. I mean, I think he's probably going to put pressure on Cuba, though I wouldn't expect like a strike in that sense. But I mean, there's a lot of poorly run places in the world, right? Like you can imagine, sort of like some Central African countries, particularly ones with like a lot of minerals. Like, are we going to see a kind of big, beautiful mineral real toppling of regimes, or I mean, it's possible. Do you think any of those kind of creep above 20% before 2028?
I haven't thought too much about the Cuba one. The Cuba one seems like the one that's kind of close. I wouldn't have thought there's really too many others. I mean, Iran is both a very dysfunctional regime, but also one that has caused really like just a lot of trouble for everyone over the years. Venezuela has caused a reasonable amount of trouble and is also right next to the US. It's in their backyard, so there's kind of additional incentive there for the US to put its foot down. I can't think of too many other countries that are both notorious troublemakers and with these very fragile regimes that are relatively easy to bust up, smash up, and say, look, someone else take over and see if you can do a better job. I can't think of too many.
Okay. Anything else you want to say? Any other, or we'll move on. Any other things you think are interesting to sort of like give some numbers on in this space? Obviously, I'm asking you to do this rapidly. These aren't the same as if you'd spent 20 or 30 minutes on a forecast. Listeners, please.
No,
we're going to hold Sabisky's a little bit, but not like massively.
No, I think those are my views on Iran. I think the Iranians, of course, should kind of try to come to some kind of compromise with Mr. Trump. I hope it doesn't come to violence. It'd be regrettable if it does, obviously, but I guess we'll
almost,
see.
In your view, pretty likely. And mine too, frankly. Okay. Do you think the vote counting of any state is going to be delayed in the midterms? Are there going to be agents going in, taking boxes of votes? Is that or adjacent things? Allow. I guess do you think anything like this is going to happen?
I really haven't thought too much about this. Should we skip over this one? I really haven't thought too much about this at all. I also find it a bit hard to get my head around because votes are always delayed in the US. I feel like some of these states take weeks and weeks and weeks to count their votes. Obviously, being British, I find this very hard to understand, but apparently that's just the way it is over there. What do I know? So
sure, okay, yeah, absolutely. In which case, okay, so the next one is any Chinese model going to be a top 3 model for like the majority of a developer's workflow for a month before the end of the year? Feel free to twist that question around. That's kind of the thing I'm aiming at. Often you and I have sort of a disagreement as to exactly how good Chinese models are. I think they are actually these days pretty solid for research. And, I guess I might flick up the open router. I've been doing some stuff on open router questions as well. And if you look at the open router rankings, Chinese models really, they're having a bit of a moment at the moment. In the last few weeks, you've got Minmax, Kimi, GLM5, DeepSeek, which of the name models, I don't know, sort of somewhere between 25 and 50%. What do you think gets to the heart of the disagreement between us on this? Do you think my question is framed right?
No, I don't even think we have a disagreement, really, to be honest with you. Yeah, I wasn't where we do disagree. I mean, obviously, I mean, I do think the US model's better for sure. I don't think we disagree. I think it's really just about the Chinese models are more specific. They're more jagged in their kind of profile of what they're good and bad at, basically, whereas the American models are kind of better all around. But I think, the reason for this isn't hard to understand. It's because the US models are trained on just way more data, and the American labs have way more available to have way more compute and data as well for post training. So I mean, I think the leading Chinese models these days are trained on, I want to say, anywhere from sort of 15 trillion to about 30 trillion tokens worth of data. The big US models, I think it's probably more like 130 trillion tokens worth of data. So it's not really that surprising to me that the American models have kind of like more general high performance, kind of like across the board. And of course, the Chinese labs are so incredibly starved for compute that they have to be very specific in their choices of what they do their reinforcement learning for in post trading. So it's not that surprising to me that the profile is much more uneven. But obviously they can still be, for specific things, for specific workflows, research, and aspects of coding at least. I mean, we can see from this. I mean, sure. Now, like OpenRouter only processes, I think, like 1 to 2% of, probably not even that actually, of global token volume. But I think it's still a pretty good for sort of, I mean, I'm guessing for sort of like small independent developers, then it's still a pretty good guide into what they find helpful and what they find helpful as well. The given price point, obviously, the fact that the Chinese models are much cheaper is obviously relevant, I think, for a decent number of people.
So
where do we disagree?
Okay. I think at this point we disagree on none of that. I guess to get this question, do you expect a Chinese model to be the big model for developers? Chinese Claude Code, Chinese co-work, Chinese people using any other system using a Chinese model as their big model for a month, or even in the top 3. Do you expect that by the end of the year?
Yeah, definitely. Well, didn't we already have that last year with DeepSeek R1? DeepSeek R1 definitely got huge amounts of consumer mind share anyway. I don't know so much about how it was adopted by developers, but I mean,
my sense is it was never the coding model of and if it was for
sure, probably not for coding, but I mean, DeepSeek R1 was the DeepSeek app got to #1 in the American app charts. I mean, it got huge consumer mind share. But I mean, and that was before the Chinese labs were specializing much more for coding. Because I mean, what's actually happening is these Chinese labs are becoming American labs, right? Sorry, well, they're becoming global labs in the sense that they are like a Moonshot, who make the Kimi models, are now making more money outside China than they are inside China, right?
Sure.
I don't know. I would not be shocked at all if the same is true for Minimax. I know that ZAI have probably a bit more of a solid domestic corporate consumer base, but even them, I would not be surprised if they're getting a ton of revenue now from outside China as well. So,
I guess my contention is they're probably not gonna get to be a top coding model. I don't know. I would guess I'd be somewhere in the 15% range.
What do you mean, the absolute #1 consensus best coding model in the world?
I would say even in the top 3 for a month. That's my claim. I think
the top 3 by use, or the top 3 by how good they are? Because people can use the 4th best model, and they can prefer that to the 3rd best model if the 4th best is a 7th of the price. Because the price thing is quite relevant,
Yeah, let's. I mean, maybe I'm going to be completely off base here. Let's assume it's something like, we're not going to get these numbers, but if we there's models that are used by developers themselves, and there's models that are used as part of APIs to produce services for the public or for companies, whatever. And I think I'm mainly focused on this first one. I think the second one we're probably pretty much agreed on. I think we're going to see Chinese models doing really well there. I think we're already starting to. But in terms of models that developers are using for their own tokens in their own work, I think I would be pretty surprised if for a month, if we could get the data of all the tokens being purchased by all the companies by their developers. I would be surprised if a Chinese model was in the top 3.
I mean,
after Claude, after Codex, after Gemini, I would be surprised.
Oh, sure. Yeah, but I mean, I think we're never going to get the data to really know either way, I guess. I mean, we will, yeah.
But if we could, in the world we could, you're quite higher than me. Is that the point we're making?
I mean, I honestly might not be. I don't really have a sense of. I mean,
okay.
I really don't have a strong sense of of what the breakdown right now is for models that independent developers are using. I'm obviously that's not going to map so well to what we see on OpenRouter. I wouldn't know. I think that one. I mean, I'm sure we could get some good forecasts on this, but I think we might need a bit more data to figure out where we are now.
Yeah, and indeed to kind of kick the tires on exactly what we mean, what we disagree on. Okay, interesting. do you think? I guess sort of twofold. What's the chance that a Chinese lab is kind of regularly mentioned in the same breath as Anthropic, XAI, OpenAI, Google DeepMind? Or maybe you think they already should be, in which case probably that's the worst question.
It definitely should be. I mean,
right.
I don't know.
And then,
I think like the disparity in what the Chinese labs have been able to achieve, given the extreme disparity in resources, is I think incredibly impressive and pretty mind blowing. I think it's far more impressive than anything XAI have done, given the resources they have available to them. And honestly, Gemini, I mean, I don't really know what to say. I mean, everyone accuses the Chinese labs of benchmarking all the time. And I think that's definitely true, at least for some of them, some of the time. But I really feel like from what I read on Twitter and the vibes and all this kind of stuff, I really feel like this is definitely very true for DeepMind and Gemini. It feels like every Gemini release that comes out, everyone's like, oh, wow, these benchmark scores are amazing. This one's fantastic. It seems sweet. And then people actually use it, and the performance always seems to disappoint relative to the latest model from Anthropic or OpenAI. So if anyone's benchmark maxing aggressively here, to me it seems much more like Google DeepMind, but maybe I'm wrong.
Okay, so what can we? Trying to think about if there's any forecast we can get. I think there is like a notable difference in terms of like. I think we're basically agreed. I think we're both higher than the public on some notion that for services using like APIs, it really could be known that like Chinese models are the ones to use. I think like people are underrating. There's a lot of talk about Opus, blah blah blah, but like I think people are underrating like Kimi. There's obviously going to be a new. I think there's a new DeepSeek model coming out.
DeepSeek V4 will be out this year. Kimi K3 will be out this year, and obviously, both those labs are going to push really, really hard on algorithmic improvements, because that's sort of what they've got going for them, right? They don't have access to anywhere near a fraction of the money or the compute of the US labs, but what they do have is an incredibly smart and innovative workforce, right? They have these amazing researchers. They have the best talent pool.
Yeah.
So they're going to try to push as hard as they can on that frontier.
And then, okay, so I think we're both sort of above, we're not going to do a forecast here. I don't like to do fake forecasts, but, it's sort of like if we're doing scores out of 10 or something, it seems to me that like maybe the public is like 3 out of 10 on Chinese models for products. And I'm like, or maybe 2, and I'm like 5, 6, and maybe you're a bit there or even higher or something. Like,
well, I mean, I don't really know what the general public. I mean, I don't have strong views on sort of like the general public things. To be honest with you, I mean, when I go on the local Reddit, then people seem pretty keen on most of the Chinese models. Obviously, that's not representative. That's people who are very interested in models.
Sure, okay,
general,
but you don't expect the Chinese models to get any share of like US public consumer.
Well, DeepSeek already did, to be honest with you. People really, really, really like DeepSeek R1, and I think a big part of the reason why that kind of faded out was honestly because DeepSeek had such crazy compute limitations that the app became basically unusable for about a month after they kind of went viral. So
okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if a Chinese model this year got some pretty big US consumer mindshare. I guess the other one that's interesting here, not maybe a language model, but it'd be very interesting to see what happens in the next month or so when Cdance 2.0 becomes available to the rest of the world, because at the moment it's pretty much only available within China. But as and when ByteDance roll it out to the rest of the world, then that could be another huge kind of consumer mindshare moment for video generation and Chinese models. I've
already seen a lot of those. They are tremendously impressive.
They are amazing. I mean, Demis Hassabis said at Davos that he thinks that ByteDance is the most impressive and most scary Chinese lab, and it would. I totally get where Demis is coming from. ByteDance is an amazing company, incredibly, super innovative, super talent rich. They can train on all this data from TikTok and Douyin, and obviously Demis is, his whole thing is that he takes multimodality very, 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 very seriously, and he thinks, Demis thinks really, I think you can't really have kind of true AGI without a lot of kind of real world data from, a lot of that's going to come from video, I assume. So I think that's part of the reason why Demis is so high on ByteDance.
can you give? I'm struggling to think of a way we could cash out a forecast on this. Like, do you have anything that you think?
No, we don't need a forecast. Sometimes, Nathan, it's just fine to chat to your friends.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think I find that believable. I think Sea Dance is. If people haven't seen it, I would recommend watching some of. I saw a video where they like made Tom Cruise attack Brad Pitt or something, and it was just
one of the whole Chinese. One of the top Chinese film directors made a whole 5-minute short film with Sea Dance, starring himself. It's fantastic. Thoroughly recommend. Check out my Twitter. I think I retweeted it there. Cindy, you tweeted about it. It's wonderful.
Great. Okay. No, I'm going to do one thing. I sense we do. So I do think there's, in terms of the vibes, I do think there is a disconnect between you on this like coding model thing. Maybe you're sort of expecting that maybe developers will be using more Chinese models. We're not going to know, but like I do sense we disagree on that. Is that fair?
Maybe I'm honestly not sure. I feel like it's very hard for me to say because coding is not what I use LLMs for. I'm kind of very caught up with using them for research and trying to get them as good as they can be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Briefly, can you give your thoughts on that? Like, you use a range of models for research, right? Like, which models do you really like?
Yeah, I've mostly been using Kimi 2.5 for the last month or so. A big part of the reason there is I like the personality more. It's more disagreeable, doesn't flatter you as much, and it's a lot of the Western models have problems with political bias. Mm-hmm. And what I really mean by that is they just have a huge bias towards assuming that things that Western governments tell you are true. It's sort of, it's sort of the inverse. So, whenever I'm trying to do research on kind of more Western-facing political questions, then I find it actually much more helpful to use Chinese models. Likewise, whenever you're trying to do research on China and you want LLMs to help you, it's if you get into the sphere of Chinese politics, then you have to use Western models because the Chinese LLMs they often just shut down on you. Not always, but they usually do.
Okay. Right. Well, let's move on. While trying to do this, I vibe coded a dashboard of some forecasts, just like my forecasting app to not
Very cool.
quite the app, but like a forecasting stage to run it. I asked it for SABS. It called you the Strategic Assessment Briefing System. I just made it up. I enjoyed that.
I'm going to copy that now. That's amazing.
Yeah, just have my. Okay, so the next, so we can do Taiwan or we can do UK politics. Which is your pick?
I don't mind. We can do either.
Let's do UK.
Sure. Well, we're gonna do both. So.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? When is Starmer out this year?
Yeah. Again, I'd say that's slightly more likely than I'd say it's around 77%.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think it's slightly over 75.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what. I'm just going to see what.
I mean, that might be too, to be honest with you, but.
Oh, great. I'm going to have to briefly change my VPN settings so I can access British prediction markets. Storm. Oh, right, there's no one. I'm just going to find the right market for it. If anybody wants tips, I think British betting markets on politics are very good. I have tried a bit of political betting in the UK and I've never had much luck. I don't know if this is because British insiders are like all betting themselves. Certainly some are, but I don't know. I think my sense is that like a 10K market is like a much bigger market than like a $10,000 market would be in the US. I think it's just like much more embedded in culture. You're getting a lot more information. Currently, this Smarkets isn't the biggest one, but they all trade with like there's people arbitraging, so it's basically all the same. In my view.
Sure. So
this is at 70%. So yeah, I think personally on my inside information, I would be like lower than this. Like as in on my internal view, like I think it's been bad, and I think the local elections are going to be terrible. But first of all, I think there's like a strategic thing, like who's going to be the one to try and remove him. Seems like you've got like Rayner and Streeting right now, and they don't have like great incentives. And also, like if I was going to push Starmer, I'd push him like a year before the election. I don't know that I would push him now.
Well, but the problem is that then you only get to be prime minister for a year, and you want to be prime minister for longer because otherwise, why are you bothering?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Also,
okay.
the Labour Also, the Labour Party is really, really fed up with this guy. He was never really one
Yeah.
of them. He's never really like one of the boys, as it were. And they kind of put up with him for convenience's sake, and I think they're just pretty much done with him.
Mhm.
So I think he's I would say around 77% to go this year. There's also the Gorton and Denton by-election, which I think could easily be a tipping point.
Do you have
By the
takes?
way, I would also not it's a by-election. They're almost impossible to forecast. I would say I think it is probably. I mean, well, if I had to say, I think it is. I mean, this is also a very weird constituency. It's super demographically divided. My guess is that I would pretty strongly predict that that Labour do lose the seat. Who wins it? I have absolutely no idea. I mean, my goodness, it is almost impossible to say. I mean, obviously,
Currently,
I agree.
66% Greens.
Yeah, Greens or Reform, but I mean, what the correct numbers are there, I think is almost it's impossible to forecast. You're just on a hiding to nothing because by-election turnouts are very hard to know. The people that show up are not the same. The people that vote at general elections. People don't vote for the same reasons they do at general elections. Also,
Sure.
people are more likely to protest vote. It's just a mess.
I mean, do you think that's priced in here? Or do you think,
that actually doesn't look too crazy to me? I would probably be a bit higher on Reform and slightly lower on the Greens, but maybe the market knows something I don't. So,
I saw someone tweeting yesterday being like, Labour seemed like a great buy at 13%. May I say this is not financial advice? But what I'm going to say is that you have to understand why these situations are how they are. And I think often the market does have some reasonable understanding. There's quite a lot of money in this market. I mean, not on these specific ones, but there's far more on Betfair, etc., which these are traded against. And so I think, and you don't know this, Sabs, but if you're listening, base rates are all well and good if you know nothing. But if you're looking at a prediction market, then unless that prediction market has $500 in total, my advice would just be update straight to prediction market and then try and get a sense of what the prediction market knows versus what you know. And this is not at all a completely standard base rate situation. This is a specific geography or a specific things happening. And I'm not saying this person, it was a British Politico who said this, and they might have insider information which they're using, and they're saying, actually, I think Labour's going to do okay. But that's not at all the same as being the party, the party doesn't win only 20% of the time. It's base rates are useful for something, and that's when you're not knowing. But
well,
just because you think
also,
the market doesn't quote unquote know.
If we were going with the base rate here, going with the base rate probably would lead you to downweight Labour even more, because the correct base rate would be what happens in British by-elections. And in British by-elections, we pretty routinely see some crazy swings against the incumbent party.
Yeah. And Labour are polling terribly right now.
Right.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You look like you're about to give some wisdom.
No, I don't have. That was my wisdom. I don't have any more wisdom to give. But I think this by-election is this by-election plus the local elections are sort of two very plausible things that could lead to Starmer getting pushed out because the party gets fed up with him. I think there's also, by the way, some chance he just resigns. He's just I'm fed up with this. I hate it. My wife doesn't like it. I'm miserable. I'm done.
Interesting. Okay.
He clearly is just not enjoying being prime minister on some basic level. He doesn't look happy. He looks miserable all the time. He looks miserable and kind of not happy and comfortable in his own skin, and he looks terrible, to be honest with you.
I was reading an article by the commentator Cartoons Hate Her last night, if you are aware of Cartoon Hate Her.
Yeah.
And her case, I'm not going to swear on this, but the candidate who F blanks wins. That's kind of the case that she was making. You got you're looking for somebody who serves, somebody who's got swagger. And her case was that in the US elections, clearly Clinton had swagger. Bush had more swagger than Gore. Obama clearly had swagger. Trump had more swagger than Clinton. 2020 Biden had quite a lot of swagger, actually, and maybe Trump. But by 2024, the swagger was not the good kind. Yeah. And by 2024, clearly, Trump had more. Trump didn't have a lot, but neither did Kamala. And I was I don't know. Let's briefly think. Do we think that the swagger does the swagger approach to British politics, does that apply?
Ooh, very interesting. Well, I mean, I guess
Like
Cameron.
Starmer Sunak is more or less a dead heat, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Boris, I mean, like Corbyn had swagger in ways. So
Yeah,
like,
but Boris
like
was
Boris
the king
has
of
a
swagger.
lot.
Boris
Yeah.
has a lot. Cameron definitely had, I think, more swagger than Ed Miliband and Gordon Brown.
I think that's true.
So there's that. Tony Blair, obviously. I mean, what else needs to be said? Maggie, obviously. I now the one I don't know so much about is 1992 because that was a bit before my time. I don't have strong opinions on Major versus Kinnock.
I don't know. Seems like because Matt Iglesias right now is on a big sort of like anti-Newsom campaign. Newsom is currently up in the prediction markets, and Newsom does have swagger, I think, but he doesn't tend to beat Republicans. He doesn't have a history of beating Republicans. So
Newsom, I just think, is such an empty shell. I just think it really falls apart the second you turn your brain on. I mean,
I guess I just don't think he has a history of beating Republicans, and I think that's like a pretty important part of winning the presidency. But I guess, like, do you think
not the one?
Does in the world where we think, do you therefore think he's got less swagger than say like he goes up against Vance, or do you think somehow like the swagger breaks down? Like, is the swagger frame good? I guess is my question.
I mean, Newsom has to win a Democrat primary before he gets that far, which seems. I think the swagger frame is pretty good, but
I don't know. I think Newsom. I think Newsom serves. Like, I think like I think he's got good Twitter game. I think he's like handsome and like kind of smarmy.
Fake. The whole thing is just this facade. I really just think it's all just like totally phony.
I
mean,
I am no Newsom fan.
I think the problem is that like you just can't fool enough of the voters for that long, and once people like vaguely paying attention, then people are just going to realize that this guy is.
And also, California has not been well run, right? Like,
well, also again,
this is basically all Iglesias' take, but the Kamala and Newsom are like very similar candidates, right? They are both from the same state that hasn't been doing that well. They've taken state level offices. They don't tend to do that great against Republicans on like the times where you compare them, and so they're like going to try.
They're California Democrat nepo babies from the same political stable, same Willie Brown, San Francisco backgrounds, politically very, very similar. I mean, honestly, Kamala is less tarnished by the failures of California governance than Newsom. Much less so, actually. She hasn't been governor all these years.
Yeah, I think had she stood more on a tough on crime record for a longer time, tried to push away from Biden, she could have done better than she did.
It's going to be pretty wild if Kamala wins the Democrat primary, but I guess she is the favorite, so there's just not really any alternatives.
There's like
she's way ahead of the polls.
Oh yeah,
obviously polls this far out are not that super meaningful, but they're also not meaningful, especially because Kamala is a very known entity, and most of the other people who could plausibly run are very known entities.
I don't know. I think I would tend to, particularly, I was going to say I shouldn't use Polymarket, I should use Kalshi, but like Kalshi offers people interest, so its long-term markets have some incentives.
Okay,
and there's already like 52 million in volume, like. And these, 31% Newsom, 20% AOC, 7% John Ossoff. I mean, like, Kamala's got 6%. Like
6% on Kamala? Are you joking? That's insane. Wow, the market's really out to lunch on that one. Holy moly. Like, I
don't know.
Do you know that Democrats like Kamala Harris? Like, she's quite popular with Democrats. And she's a woman and she's black and she's not, like, really particularly offensive to any Democrat group.
But she did run and she did lose.
Yeah, but Democrats like her.
Okay.
Also, her competition is
What's your percentage that Kamala gets the nominee in 2028?
Well, okay, so I would say Kamala... I mean, I would just flip this around. I would say Kamala should probably be, like, 30%-ish.
Okay.
But here's one more thing I'm gonna say. If I could freeze the field, right? If we have a conditional forecast, and if the condition is like we know what the field is now, and the field is going to be like Kamala, Newsom, AOC,
or conditional on
Buttigieg.
somebody not outside this field winning, right? Or conditional with somebody not more than sort of 5% winning, right? So you've got Pritzker, Buttigieg, Harris, Shapiro, Ossoff, AOC, Newsom.
Yeah, I would say Kamala's probably. I mean, she might even be as high as 45-50%. That doesn't seem unreasonable to me.
Okay.
She's a known quantity, no crazy scandals. She's liked by Democrats. Yeah, she lost, but I mean, you know, the competition's like incredibly weak and threadbare. I would say most of the probability of Kamala, I would say a pretty big chunk of the probability of Kamala not being the nominee is someone from outside this pool deciding to run, you know.
Sure.
I have always regarded it as kind of like an interesting question, right? You know, when is a celebrity going to really try and make a serious effort to win the Democrat nominee? Because Republicans have already shown they will vote for a celebrity. So if you are a celebrity who wants to be president, then obviously your best bet now is to do so as a Republican. But are we ever going to get a celebrity? I mean, surely we will at some point. Surely we're going to get a celebrity who looks at this field of pygmies, frankly, and just thinks, surely I can win. Surely I can win. Let's roll the dice. You know, surely I can win, right?
Okay, I mean, give me a forecast. When is a reasonable question to say, you know, is it 2028, is it 2032, and what's your odds?
What you mean for a celebrity running or a celebrity winning? Because they're quite different things.
A celebrity getting more than like... A celebrity like at any point being higher than 15% in like a well-run prediction market. Something in that space.
I think that's fairly high. That must be like a 30% thing, surely, for 2028. That's quite a low bar to clear for 2028.
Okay, give me a slightly higher bar then. Give me a higher bar.
A celebrity like actually winning a state in
celebrity winning a state.
Early stages of a primary.
Celebrity winning a state in an early primary.
I guess like 7-8% for 2028. I'm spitballing here. I'm making up numbers, but I haven't thought about it too much. But that doesn't seem totally crazy to me. Okay. Do
you have any thoughts on the Republican stuff?
I mean, here's the other thing, by the way. And by the way, here's the other thing, right? If you're an American celebrity, like a lot of them, right? You've spent the last 10 years quite carefully triangulating all the culture war stuff, right? Yeah. For the most part, most celebrities have just been playing it safe on culture war stuff. So they don't have a strong record of making crazy offensive out there statements on hot button issues like race or trans or any of this stuff, right? Yeah. But people like Kamala do, right? And people like Gavin Newsom really do. So a celebrity, I mean, the major barrier for a celebrity to clear is really just getting Democrat voters, particularly black voters, I think, to take them seriously and to vote for them, right? But in terms of kind of all the other stuff, I think the celebrity has got a lot. I think a well-known, well-liked celebrity could have a huge amount going for them in a Democrat primary, particularly when you look at how weak the field is.
Okay, do you have any takes the Republican nominee?
I guess just Vance or Rubio, right? Beyond that, it doesn't seem. Yeah. I mean, I'm not even sure it will get that. Vance and Rubio really going to go up against each other?
Sorry, what is going on with this market? A VP nominee, right? Okay, sorry.
I mean, I could see a world where Rubio and Vance just make a deal, and Rubio just sort of endorses Vance, and the deal is that Rubio basically gets to do what he's doing now. I mean, sure. Rubio is already, by far one of the most powerful secretaries of state in recent memory. Seems like a pretty good deal. I mean, you might not even want to be president at this rate. It's a lot of extra hassle, and you're getting pretty much what you want on the foreign policy front. So, maybe Rubio and Vance don't get on well behind the scenes, and maybe Rubio feels that President Vance would really clip his wings. That's certainly possible.
I don't know if you've seen this. Sorry, I do enjoy
Rubio. What, the Marco Rubio,
having to hold. There's all the kind of Rubio finding out that he's got to also be the president of Venezuela.
It's
at,
incredible,
6
isn't it? The Rubio El Jefe memes. That's wonderful. But he must be enjoying himself. And if Trump lets him kind of do a putsch in Cuba, then that will just be the icing on the cake for Marco Rubio. At that point, why do you even need to be president? You've accomplished all your goals.
Sure.
So, but yeah, I don't really take beyond that. I think it's too early for Barron. I'm sure Barron will run for president one day, but I think 2028 is a bit too early. I think that's going to be a 2036 kind of thing. Yeah. Oh yeah, he's still yeah. I always forgot there's this silly the age limit is just
35.
completely the wrong place. Like, why is the age limit 35? But like, why is there no age cutoff at like 74 or something? Come on, it's. But yeah, of course,
okay.
Still way too young.
So, what would you give Vance more than 45%? Then I think if you think it's sort of like 45%, if you think it's like each, and then you think there's like some chance that he comes in behind.
I might. Yeah, I think these numbers don't seem totally out there, but I might put Rubio up a little higher actually.
So currently, Vance is at 45% on Kalski.
I might
and
bump.
Rubio's at 20%.
I might bump. I actually might bump both Vance and Rubio up. To be honest with you.
Okay. Well, I don't know if this counts as my forecasted going off the rails, but I wasn't planning to do US politics, but I'm glad we have.
That's fine.
And
do you want to talk about Taiwan?
We are going to talk about Taiwan, yeah. Though, briefly, do you have any takes on who's going to be next Labour leader?
Well, I mean, I think it's the... I think Angela Rayner is a pretty clear favourite. And I think the second most likely favourite is probably Ed Miliband. Which is a terrifying thought, Nathan. That is a really, really terrifying thought.
Would you want to give numbers for those two?
Say Rayner is probably like a 40%, maybe 45. Actually, she could be higher. Ed Miliband maybe sort of 20, 25-ish, and then all the rest sort of spread out among all these other candidates. I mean, obviously Streeting should probably be like a 10 to 15% candidate, but I think the problem for Streeting is I think the Mandelson stuff is really going to hurt him.
Okay.
And then after that, and then you've got like Al Khan, who is one of these forces guys.
Very good-looking man. That's all I saw. I watched the new episode of Mock the Week, or I think it was Mock the Week. Yeah, that was all they could say about Al Khan.
Yeah, he's a forces guy. I mean,
I don't know any of his policies. I don't know whether
he doesn't have any.
He's charismatic.
His appeal is I'm from the military, and British democracy is failing, so we need the military to step in and sort it out. I think that's basically the Al Khan's pitch.
Right. Let's jump onto Taiwan then. I think that's the last thing on our strategic information. Who knows what we called it? In which case, yeah, I guess I would like to do sort of 3 Taiwan questions, which percent invasion of Taiwan, percent blockade that isn't an invasion of Taiwan before 2030 for those two, and then percent that Taiwan is like as or more separate from China than it currently is by some future date, maybe 2040, but you can push that back if you want.
Sure.
So feel free to talk about your thoughts. Feel free to give some numbers. Yeah, whatever.
Well, I used to be kind of higher on the idea that China was more likely to invade this decade. I've kind of traditionally given that in the past a kind of like 20 to 30% region, maybe around sort of 23-ish. But I'm starting to now think it's less likely. I mean, for one thing, we're a decent way through the decade, and it hasn't happened. There's no real signs of it happening, so that's one thing. Obviously that's quite a meaningful thing to update on, obviously. And I think the other thing is that I think Chinese policymakers now may well feel that they do have a bit more incentive to kind of push things back. Because I think if you were going to invade Taiwan, you probably wouldn't want to do so when Trump is in office. I think that maybe just adds unnecessary risk. So there's that to think about, and I think they probably would think about that. I think the other thing to think about is from their perspective is that they may just very well feel that they can get what they want through kind of regular political means. The DPP loses power, loses popularity, the KMT gets back in charge, and then maybe there's space to work out some kind of arrangement, right? Some kind of deal.
do you think that...
memories of Hong Kong start to fade a bit? I'm not saying that is
Okay,
going to happen.
so here's like a counter take on this. Is something like,
Sure.
Trump is very amenable to deals. And
Yep.
like...
He likes a good deal. Don't we all?
You know, there's something he really wants at some point, and then China's like, hey, look, if you let us like take Taiwan, then we will give you whatever we want in this other thing. You know, we'll make it like a nice, we'll do it like in Hong Kong with the Brits, you know, we'll like, they can run themselves until 2060, and, you know, but there's like a thing signed that says like at 2060 they come back into the fold, and, you know, you don't kick up a stink, you know, we'll blockade them, but you don't, you know, and then eventually we'll cripple them. Like, why isn't that like? And Trump seems like much more amenable to that kind of a deal than previous presidents.
Yeah, I just find it hard to imagine what the thing could be that would be so valuable. I think it would still be a pretty decent loss of face for Trump. The Republican Party would really, really, really hate it, which I think is something of an important consideration.
Yeah.
It would involve pretty significant domestic political costs for Trump, and I don't think it would be viable. I really think this has much more to do with politics on Taiwan itself.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, what do you think the chance? So you said you were sort of 25% on invasion. What do you think you're in?
Now I think it's
invasion
much lower.
by 2030.
Now I think it's much lower. I think it's probably around maybe more around like 5 to 8%.
Okay, and what about
drastically?
Sure, and what about no invasion but a blockade? So, I mean, I guess many of the invasion scenarios have a...
I will say I'm not entirely sure what the point of a blockade would be if it's not the precursor to invasion, but obviously that is more likely. Sure, there could be some worlds where it makes sense. Maybe
well, as in, like, maybe it can be the precursor, but maybe like Taiwan like gives in.
Makes a deal. Sure. Oh,
I mean, if you want, then you can include that as part of your. You can say your percentage of an invasion is even lower.
Oh, okay, sure. If we're including that, then maybe a sort of like 14 to 18% around there.
Okay, and is the 5% like part of that 14 to 8%, or like they add to each other?
No, the 5% is like part of it.
Yeah. Okay. So you're sort of saying, yeah, there's like a 10 to 12% chance of just a blockade for some reason, or either because it's successful or because it's like trying to
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And I don't know. Call your long timelines. How like give me a date in the future, and it's like, what's the chance that Taiwan is as separate or more separate than it is currently at that?
I think that's pretty low. I think that's by 2040, 2045, that kind of thing.
Yeah, 2045.
Oh, I think by 2045 they'll. I think there's. I think by 2045 I would say it is probably around kind of like 60%ish that the question will have resolved itself either by military or political means.
And resolved itself, quote unquote, in China's favor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm probably lower than that.
Okay, that's all right. Let's disagree.
Like, I guess a key question is like, if she dies, like, you know, or just like, you know, he has a heart attack or something, like, how confident are you that the next person is like feels basically as or more strongly about this than he does?
I'm pretty confident. I think like we want Taiwan back. This is like our territory. These are our people. Belongs to us. I think this is like a core belief of Chinese nationalism. You don't get to the top of the CCP without being Chinese nationalist.
Okay. And you don't think that like AI's going pretty big, right? Like, you know, the acceleration's going up. Like,
you know what I think about.
Like you don't see, like, it seems to me that like a lot of big AI stuff is going to happen between now and then, and maybe we just get some kind of AI reroll. Things are very different, and like China's concerns are different than they are current.
No. So this doesn't really factor into my thinking.
Okay. Well, I think that is most of the questions that I desired to ask.
Sure. Good
my
questions.
my younger brother does the editing for this podcast, so thanks, Alex. And I now have his like voice in my head sometimes being like, okay, like what's your energy like? How are you doing? He's got like got much more I think of a sense of these things than I do. So I guess he would be encouraging me to wrap it up. So
you can talk for longer if you want. I'm not going. I mean, I'm happy to chat for another 20 minutes if you like.
So I guess like my question would be: do you think there's like any hot takes, particularly hot takes that you think you could put a forecast on? Things you think like the main narrative. If you imagine that people have these internal prediction markets in their heads, are there any things that you think they're like sort of wildly miscalibrated on? Or particularly like also to round out things we've discussed so far.
I gotta say, I was pretty shocked to see how much the prediction market loves Gavin Newsom and hates Kamala Harris, but what do I know? Well, I mean, there are lots of interesting ones. The British monarchy has been in the news this week. What is the chance that Britain is still a monarchy by, say, 2040? I think that's a very interesting question. I don't know if there are any markets on this. I haven't looked, but I think that's an interesting one, right?
So one sec. Let me just go through these. So Democratic. I want to see what the poly market. No, the poly market's basically the same as Kalshi. Okay, I guess I wondered whether, and also.
Wow. I'm going to buy a bunch of Harris after this, I think.
But actually, sorry, poly market also offers people interest. So I thought there was like a difference in how you should. But poly market has, again, obviously volume numbers for people checking that they're not completely real. They're like how much is like promised on like an order book, and so like here I'm gonna like scroll down and like these numbers are all numbers that like haven't happened yet. So there's like how they count some of this stuff is funky. So I can never really quite remember. Probably I should know this, but whether it's sometimes like it's like 10 times less or whatever than it says. But still, they're claiming $500 million, which means this is like tens of $1 million in serious money, which I think is pretty surprising for an election, which isn't going to happen for another 2.5 years.
People love forecasting on. It's not that. I mean, people love forecasting on US elections, right? It's not that surprising to me.
Yeah. I don't know.
Obviously, and it's obviously very important and consequential. So they should. Yeah. Will Britain still be a monarchy by 2040, by 2050? I think that's a very interesting, good question.
Okay. What's your? Do you have any? Would you give a number on that?
I guess it's still probably around 80% that the monarchy sticks, but I mean, probably 5 years ago I would have said 98, 99%, right? Now I think it's obviously way lower. A lot has changed.
Yeah.
I think there are also interesting questions about the constitutional future of kind of some of these Western European states that are facing kind of huge kind of social and economic problems.
I guess a quick key question also is like, will the monarchy survive Charles? I think it's like a bit like, I don't quite know how old Charles is, so like.
Well, he's got cancer, so I mean, let's say he lives another 5 years, right?
Okay, right. Okay, fine. Then 2045 is a reasonable time frame. I hope he does well and that he gets the best care.
Of course.
Okay. Now, do you have any like specific countries that you think are?
I think. Well, I mean, Britain, France, Spain are kind of the obvious ones. Greece. I mean, I think there's a lot of countries where the existing governance model is just clearly failing. Germany, of course, is another one, right? Actually, and the kind of the tools to resolve it within the kind of sort of within the kind of sort of constitutional toolkit seem to be lacking, right?
We didn't do next election, next UK election.
Well, we can talk about that in a second, but I think that. I mean, I was having a chat to 2.5 the other day, and I asked it: is there a single Westminster parliamentary democracy out there that you think is doing really well, kind of, both doing well as a democracy, but doing well socially, doing well economically? And it told me no. The answer it gave me of sort of an unequivocal success was Singapore, but obviously not. Also, like, not really democracy. And then it did mention India, which actually I think India is actually by far the best answer, in the sense that, it sort of said all these problems with Indian democracy, but I don't think anything was too bad. And I think, India sort of socially and economically is going well and going in sort of like the right direction, right? So
yeah, India hasn't really been going in the right direction for long enough. Like, my understanding is that like there's kind of a turning the corner thing, but it's not like we're like really into the rocket ship upwards thing that we could be in.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And I'm not sure India is ever going to quite make it to rocket taking off status, but we might take it to, we might get to, Formula One car going pretty fast.
Well, I don't know. I also like India has like a lot of developers, and like, I mean, I guess in some sense, like a lot of the best, like the most talented people in India just like move to the US and like companies there.
Yeah, that's kind of I mean, that is an issue.
It's not clear that's going to stop, but I do wonder, just like, as AI allows. I mean, if Indians can afford to like use the best like models, then you might see some like. Yeah. Is that when is the first like Indian startup which like takes over the world going to be?
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, I don't actually think startup taking over the world is really a great measure of sort of economic dynamism. I think at India's stage of development, it's really just much more about, do you have functional industries, functional manufacturing? Do you have a lot of like basic manufacturing being done in your country? That's kind of like where India should be heading, right? Then once you get beyond that, then you can get into the stage of building these sort of very innovative companies that take over the world. But you need to learn to walk before you can run.
And okay, what about if my response is like?
But anyway, sorry, this is a diversion. The point I was trying to make is that I think all the Britain, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, pretty much all of these
so what about like
systems are struggling.
Is there any answer in Italy or like in like, because Italy like seems to be like perking up a little bit, if I recall what I looked at last time, just going off the top of my head, or like some of the Scandinavian nations, you're really like.
Yeah, Scandinavian nations clearly doing better, right? I'm not talking about those, but I also think that, I mean, what I'm fundamentally saying is that the politics is failing across a wide swathe of Western countries, and I think what's even more important, right, is that the tools in some countries, at least, the tools for the executive to fix it don't even really seem to be there, right?
Sure.
I think Germany is the most obvious example of this, where the system just like the voting system there just bakes in paralysis and gridlock by default, right? Because you're always going to be, governing parties are always going to be beholden to a minor party, right? You're always locked into these coalitions.
Okay, and what should we expect? Like, if this theory is true, what kinds of things are we going to expect to see?
Well, you might start to see, political parties pushing for more referendums on, say, changing voting systems, changing their fundamental, style of governance. So maybe Britain, maybe you get a push here for, it would be, you can imagine a world here where, so for instance, right, when people in Britain have talked about getting rid of the monarchy, the implicit assumption has always been we would replace it with sort of like a ceremonial presidency, right? A sort of a weak presidency that has a minimal executive power, maybe a little bit of reserve power, but it's essentially ceremonial, right? What if instead people started to say, no, we should have something much more like the US system, where we have a strong, powerful, independent executive, maybe a bit more like France, which sits outside the legislature and has, real independent power of its own kind of, real executive powers. That I could see being.
So, to try and formalize this slightly, you're like, let's say, I don't know how many people off the top of my head Australia has, but let's say a Western country with 50 million or more, 20 million or more?
20 million or more, yeah.
So 20 million more people, what's the chance that any of the kind of Western-style democracies with 20 million or more people have like a significant constitutional change in the next like 20 years?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good. I think that's a pretty good. I think that's a very good and very interesting question.
And is that something which would resolve negative in the last 20 years? It seems like worth like thinking out for a moment. Okay, I guess I don't think we'd say that Britain leaving the EU would have resolved that way. Okay.
No, although that is close actually. I think Brexit. Yeah, Brexit is actually pretty close actually. Yeah.
Okay, so
Brexit, not quite what I had in mind, that kind of thing, but not a million miles off. Oh, and of course, yes, I mean that's the other thing, right? Is of course also the future of the European Union, which I think is also a very live question. I mean, I think people don't really realise the degree to which the EU has sort of evolved over time into a sort of a regulatory suicide vest. That's sort of a mutual suicide pact where we all put our suicide vest together inside the EU club, and it makes EU law makes it incredibly hard if you would like to regulate your economy in terms of environmental regulation, labour rights, all this kind of stuff, almost impossible to do so within the EU.
So is South Korea and Japan, do they count in this group or not?
No. Okay. Those aren't Western countries. They're not democracies either.
I don't know their systems of government well enough. I mean, I don't know to what extent they have a Singapore style votes but one party thing, and I don't know how that's
neither of them are Western countries, and I wouldn't count them as real democracies, but it's fine. Moving on.
What do you think the chance of a 20 million plus Western country with a significant, or we'll throw in the EU breaks down in some really big way, not like another country
or just a big country leaves the EU, right? The EU could still carry on, but say like a big country leaves.
I think that would probably resolve it. No, I wouldn't be that surprised if another big country leaves. I guess I'm more curious about this. Like the EU, fundamentally, either two big countries leave or some more kind of fundamental collapse. What do you think of you're really saying that a country or a body that's really been stable for a while is going to change in a massive way? What odds would you put?
Obviously it's not super likely, right? Because the base rate is nothing happens, right? But say by 2045, I'd say it may be a good sort of 15%-ish.
Okay. I mean, that doesn't seem crazy above what the base rates might be if you I mean, obviously you've had Britain leave, but maybe that is higher than people think.
Yeah, I mean, Britain was kind of always the most Eurosceptic country.
Yeah,
I guess we'll see.
Okay. Any other big things you think most people aren't tracking, or that their internal markets you think are wrong on?
No, I think those are the main ones. Oh, fertility is kind of an interesting one, where I still think the mainstream demographic projections are too optimistic, and I actually expect I sort of expect most Western countries now to hit kind of South Korean levels of super low fertility by the sort of mid to late 2030s.
Okay.
I think people are way too optimistic about fertility, wildly too optimistic. People have not adjusted to this at all. But you talk to any Zoomer and you realize how incredibly bleak and bad things are out there. Just something incredibly bad has happened to the basics of social relations between men and women. As a result, I mean, where are the kids going to come from? People just aren't forming relationships. People aren't dating. People aren't socializing. People are just not going to find partners because the social fundamentals that were once ensured they had lots of chance to do so just don't exist anymore for whatever reason.
I mean, I don't want a long discussion on AI just because I don't know, for some reason I don't want one. But let's crystallize our disagreement on that. I mean, I think it's going to have, much larger ranging impacts on society than you do. I guess I think AI is probably in the top two things you mention about the last 500 million years on this planet or something, right? I think you mention evolution and then AI is two. That's I'm not saying definitely I'm 60% of that's my
strong
take.
View. So you say it's more so than the invention of the steam engine?
I think probably, yeah. I think in a big hand wavy history of this part of this the galaxy, people are going to be So like these creatures evolved on Earth, and then they like did some stuff. And like maybe you're going to talk about like the beginning of the industrial. Maybe like you pack it all in as one sweep. But I don't think. I don't know. Maybe like the Industrial Revolution is like 2, and then this is 3. But I sort of still think if you get 2, then you're like evolution AI.
I think the Industrial Revolution is going to be remembered as more consequential than AI, especially because the Industrial Revolution came first, and you don't get any AI without the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, but
I mean,
there's like lots of things like Christianity comes before the Industrial Revolution, right? Like, but like, do I think that everyone's going to be like evolution, Christianity, industrial? Like, I guess I don't.
Well, but in an economic sense, human history is relatively, in a sort of economic sense,
it's like relatively flat, and then it spikes.
Human history is relatively flat until it takes off in the Industrial Revolution. In an economic sense, the Industrial Revolution was a complete kind of like 0 to 1, a huge game changer, nothing like it ever happened before. There were sort of precursors you can point to, right? Where it's sort of like looking back, we can now see very early signs of the takeoff. There were moments in human history where we maybe got close to having Industrial Revolution, like way ahead of time, say in the Roman Empire, but we never did. I think the Industrial Revolution is going to be remembered as more consequential than AI. I do think AI will be remembered as incredibly consequential, though. Like, I mean,
okay, is AI third then for you?
Yeah, that seems not unreasonable. Yeah, I mean,
okay, and then to push back on the like fertility thing, by the late 2040s, we're going to have had a lot of AI, and I don't think we're at the top of the curve in terms of like how good these models can be. I think they're already helping developers do 10 or 100 times as much work as they could before. I think they're leading to huge amounts of build out in terms of energy and in terms of data centers. Sure. I think they're going to keep getting better. They're going to keep moving to other things. Things are going to need to be built
Sure.
Surely in this world, the re-roll from that is big enough that you're fertility is a problem. I'm not denying it. It just seems like it's down my list of concerns in terms of maybe things will be really weird by then.
The fertility collapse is like the collapse of the collapse of the human civilization. I mean, you better hope. You better hope. I mean, if fertility stuff is really as bad as I think, you'd better hope the AI overlords are ready to take over, because there won't be any humans left.
But I mean, I'm not saying I'm unconcerned, but it just seems to me if you're going to have concerns, then your key concern needs to be on maybe the key concern is much more heavily weighted towards things that happen now. But if you have long-term concerns, I think great power conflict is a big one to have. But I just think, probably for me it's AI, then great power conflict, and then fertility and maybe Western
I would just have all of this backwards. I would have all of this the other way around, to be honest with you.
Okay, interesting.
I mean,
and that's because on a fundamental level you think that AI is only going to ever be 30% or 25% of the things we care about or something, whereas the fertility is 60% or something.
Yeah, if that. I mean, look, AI is obviously going to be hugely economically consequential, and it will have social consequences, of course, in probably very weird and hard to predict ways. But
what's your model of why? I don't know. I'm not going to push much more on this, but I'm just curious. Between the two of us, what is your model of why? Do the models stop? In my world, the models keep going. Sure, there are bottlenecks, but those things get pushed to the edges. Everything gets very weird. Everything gets thrown up in the air. Who knows where we end up? And most of this is due to AI, and therefore, in some sense, AI has changed. I don't know, somewhere between 50 and 99% of the way we do everything. And in such it's meaningful to talk about fertility or something because we're hopefully still alive, or very likely still alive. And
the Industrial Revolution did. The Industrial Revolution did all of that, and fertility still proved very important for differential outcomes between nations, and there was. The Industrial Revolution arguably made things very weird, but human society carried on rolling, and fertility is an important part of that.
Okay, but labor was still pretty tightly coupled to individuals and therefore to fertility, right? Like if like the amount of work you can do like largely becomes uncoupled from like the fertility of like most individuals. I mean, like high social economic status people are already having more kids, so like maybe they're like maybe there's like a huge conflict between like the wealthy and the poor and UBI and blah blah blah. But like that to me feels like more like an AI thing than a fertility thing.
I mean, fundamentally, I think that. I mean, are you saying there's going to be like 5%, 10% economic growth a year because of AI or something like
that? Yes.
Okay. Well, I disagree. So.
Okay. Right. Okay. Well, that's.
Okay. Well, I disagree. So I think it's.
Yeah. Okay. Like that. Just like.
Yeah. All right. Fine. Yep. I think we got to the numbers. I think we probably just have very fundamental disagreements about like how about I think we probably have very fundamental disagreements about like what models can realistically be expected to be expected to become, and how intelligent in a meaningful sense they really are. I think models are still very, very dumb.
I'm going to give you an out. We can stop now, but I have another question.
Sure. Did you see the? Okay. I sent you the AIs play poker thing, right?
Pardon?
Did I send you the video of LLMs trying to play poker?
Yes.
Right. And you watched it, right?
Yeah, I watched some of it. I watched. I think it long enough. It's
okay.
Is it Doug Polk?
Yeah, I think this was a pretty meaningful demonstration, though, of like, people spend all their time now, right, using AIs in an environment. It is within the distribution, right? The AI has been trained on massive data, from and they use the AI in a domain that's very, very firmly within the distribution of that data, right? I mean, coding is the main one, right?
Yeah.
And the world of code in particular is pretty structured. It's pretty legible. It's the kind of thing that's very amenable to AI. Yeah. But no one trained LLMs on poker, right? No one trained. I mean, obviously we we do have dedicated, we do dedicated AIs that that have been AlphaZero style, RL to just get superhumanly good at poker. But that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about LLMs trying to play poker, and trying to use just like basic reasoning, and they can't even consistently form the correct relationship between their hand and the board. They actually don't know what their hand is half the time. They just lose track of it. They just keep saying like I have a flush or I have the nut flush draw when they just don't. I have a combo draw when you just don't. Right? You just get like nonsensical gibberish outputs.
Andrew is very good at poker for anyone following this. So like
you get the constant nonsensical.
Sure. Okay.
Like,
again, for anyone who hasn't watched this video, like I may put it in the show notes. I don't know if that's something.
Now, could you RL a bunch of LLMs to be at least moderately good at poker? Yes, of course you could, right? I'm not saying you couldn't.
No, but sorry. So just to anyone who hasn't seen the video, they're just sort of reading their state of mind. They're not great at it. They're trying to assess what the other models have. They're making some pretty loopy decisions. They're losing track of things.
Yeah,
I guess my response to this would be like, I don't know if you've seen the AI Village. The AI Village is this kind of goofy experiment where they have 12 models who can all sort of talk to one another, and they give them real world tasks like raise money for charity, organize an event, and then they just like see how well they actually do. And this leads to some pretty interesting stuff. Like agent characteristics, like. Where is it? There's one of the models just like keeps lying. Yeah, like AI agents are prone to disregarding goals and distracting others. O3 derailed for 8 hours by hallucinating a 93-person contact list that never existed. But then if you look at like the key findings is that like late 2020 agents are substantially outperforming early 2025 agents. And I think sensible poker would be something like obviously we're not going to allow like a poker scaffold. We're just going to have these models come in, but like the next generation of models are going to be like very good at sort of building their own scaffolds or something, and I imagine they'll have like better visual stuff as well. And so then I think it would surprise me less if the model is like remembering what it knows about poker and tracking things better, and like maybe designing some game theoretic stuff on the fly. Yeah, and then I think it will like handle poker.
the remembering and the tracking, I assume will improve. I think I agree with you on that. My point is really just more about this is clearly out of distribution for what developers actually put into data sets and what post training happens, and when you try to use AI outside the distribution, which is obviously not what the vast majority of what humans actually use it for today, but does constitute the vast majority of kind of most economically kind of valuable work, then AI still performs for very, very badly. I mean, I think these elements we have are absolutely amazing. They're these incredible tools. I think they are going to be incredibly valuable. A lot of these problems will get solved in different ways, and we'll come up with at least some kludgy fixes that allow them to perform much better in kind of economically valuable work. But I think people's what I'm really saying is that I think people's assumptions about superintelligence, super rapid economic growth. I think people are implicitly making assumptions about the raw intelligence, the native intelligence of LLMs, that are just wrong, right? I think they're just wrong. I think people are constantly fooled by the fact that they use the LLMs, the LLMs seem incredibly intelligent because people use them all the time, within the distribution, and obviously mostly just for coding, right? Within this very, very narrow slice of the distribution, and where a whole bunch of RL happened in post training, right? So people are just constantly kind of fooling themselves and thinking the models are way, way, way more intelligent than they actually are. And by the way, this is not an AI bear case. This is not an AI winter bear case, right? All these problems can get fixed in different ways, can get addressed, and we can make ourselves AI agents that are super valuable for loads of white collar work, right? I'm not disagreeing that won't happen, right? I think it absolutely will. I think AI and LLMs will be fundamentals to the economy and all that kind of stuff, right? What I don't think is what I'm much more skeptical about is these fast takeoff, rapid economic growth, super intelligent scenarios, because I just think this just is
so before 2050, 30% above the previous 5-year high. What's the chance the world GDP is 30% above the 5-year high? So 1 year to the next. It jumps 30%. It can't.
I see what you mean. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. Oh,
so
well under 1%.
Okay.
Point.
So
0.05 or something. 0.005. So something like that.
Okay. So around 0.01. 1 in 10,000.
Yeah. Maybe less. Yeah.
Maybe less.
This low.
Okay. Of any year, 30%. Higher than previous 5-year high GDP. Yeah, I think I'm much higher than that. I think I'm
No, well,
Nathan, I guess I'm
thrilled to hear we came to the core of the disagreement, and we're still friends. Yeah. It's all good.
I think I'm probably over 50% on that.
Okay, well, we can come back to this in 2050, and
sure.
I'm looking forward to the gloat already.
Sure. Okay. Is there anything that you think is worth extending this for?
No, I think that's probably enough.
I've yet to come up with a thing that goes at the end of the podcast. Now let's try a new thing. So you get 2 recommendations, one on forecasting, one off it. So 2 pieces of content. So one on the whole of geopolitics, everything we discussed. If you think people should consume one piece of content or do one thing, if you've got one piece of advice, and then one piece of advice, one piece of content, one in, one out.
Well, that's quite a hard one. I mean, for forecasting, I just sort of think. I mean, obviously, try to figure out what the base rate is for a thing. That I think people know that already. But I have a couple extra heuristics to help, which is that obviously stuff usually takes way longer than you think. Mm-hmm. That's always a good one. It just always works. And I think people are rational is a good one. I think that in aggregate, people generally usually fairly rational, at least by their own light. Sometimes they have unusual cultural biases that make them act oddly, according to maybe my eyes or your eyes, but they're rational by their own. So I think assuming that people won't do totally suicidal things is usually. I think these heuristics you can kind of do okay in forecasting with those heuristics.
Unless you're forecasting the Iranian government, seemingly. But maybe there's something
Yeah,
else
but
in there.
even then, I think it sort of works, right? Because I think probably the bet will be, well, Trump can get some of us, but he can't get all of us, and we're still going to be in charge when the dust has settled, right? Like boots on the
Okay.
ground. I mean, put it this way, right? Like Saddam Hussein got himself got, right? He could have avoided that. But the reason why he got himself got is because he just didn't believe that the US was actually serious and was actually going to invade and overthrow him. If he really believed it, it probably wouldn't have happened, right? He probably would have found a way to get out of it. It was easy for him to get out of it, right? All he had to do was just stop bullshitting about the fact he actually didn't have weapons of mass destruction.
Right. Okay.
He probably could have got himself out of this,
So I don't know that I would have guessed this was your take. So your in forecasting take is things take a bit longer, and people tend not to do completely perverse things. Like they tend to be sort of rational by their own lights, have some sort of insight, yada yada.
Yeah.
What is your out of forecasting? Your advice, something people should watch, read. Like if you've got one thing to give to the audience of this podcast.
Oh, people should read my friend Aria's blog on how to find. Well, she's written it from a woman's perspective. She's written it for how to find a husband, but I think also loads of the stuff there is very applicable for how to find a wife. Aria Schrecker, we can put it in the show notes. She's got a great Substack, and
it is very good.
It's linked to stuff I was talking about with fertility earlier, where people kind of assume that people mentally are still living in a world of sort of the 90s or early 2000s, like sort of the pre-dating app world. Boy girl meets cute and they live happily ever after, right? 10 Things I Hate About You and all that kind of good stuff. But we don't, for whatever reason, right? If you want to find a spouse these days, you have to lock in, right?
Yeah.
You got to lock in, and you got to treat like a huge a project, and you got to be okay, I'm going to these are my criteria. I'm going to go on this many dates, find this person, filter, reject, boom, and then lock in on what you want, right? You got to put the whole thing. You got to put some real effort into it.
I don't know if this is the most recent one, but one of them recently was sort of looking at that these days maybe half of people don't get married, or for any age group,
or she's
or anyone over than 25.
Gen Z is on course probably to get to that number, right? Yeah.
And so
people should, people need to calm down about AI doom. Related to this, is people need to calm down about AI doom. I mean, I obviously we've talked about this, but fundamentally, I think making sure that you're happy, living a good life, and you've got the basics to have children and be a sort of.
Sorry, just to give the stark fact, so Aria's point, which I thought was a good one, was that if you think about all your friends, you've got to consider which percentile you're in. If you're already married, obviously you're already married. But if 30% of your friends are married, and a further 25% of them are trying to get married, they're already dating long term, they seem likely to head that direction, then you're not even necessarily in the 55th percentile. You might be 70 or 85th percentile, and she's currently the average is 50%, 45%.
Right.
Even some of those people on the marriage track aren't even going to get married. They're just going to have long term relationships. And so if you want long term relationships, if you want kids, whatever, you want to consider yourself in regard to all. I thought that was as the least marriageable in some sense of all my cousins and of many of my friends. I thought that was a pretty stark thing. Okay. On which note, thank you so much, Andrew, for all of your forecasts. I really appreciate it. I guess we'll throw your Twitter in the show notes.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know. Do you have a personal blog?
That's all right.
Okay. Twitter it is.
Have a good time, everyone.
And indeed, Bismarck Brief, obviously, who you work for.
Yeah, check out the Bismarck Brief.
Thank you so much. And I guess, everyone,
everyone,
I'm trying to do this more regularly, so, hopefully we'll see another one of these soon.
I'm sure. Adios.